Oleoluwa had always lived a simple life in Ibadan, fixing cars under the hot sun and earning just enough to survive, but he carried a heart full of hope. The brightest part of his life was Tommy, the calm and intelligent woman who believed in him even when he doubted himself. She came from a wealthy home, raised with comfort and privilege, while Ola came from dust, sweat, and long days at a small mechanic shop. Still, their love was real, and it grew quietly between them like something meant to last. But Tommy's father, Chief Atateo, never accepted it. From the first moment he saw Ola, he looked at him as if he was unworthy of standing near his daughter. One evening, Tommy invited Ola to a family dinner, hoping her father would finally see the man she saw. Ola wore his best shirt, hands slightly shaking, but carrying the courage love gives a man. The dining room was beautiful, filled with chandeliers and polished silver, a world far from the noisy workshop he worked in. He greeted everyone with respect, sitting quietly, trying his best to fit in. But the moment was ruined when Chief Atateo suddenly put down his cutlery, leaned back in his seat, and stared straight at Ola with cold eyes. The room fell silent. With a voice loud enough to cut through every heartbeat, Chief declared, "This boy is a nobody. My daughter will never marry a man beneath our name." The words hit Ola harder than any insult he had ever faced. Tommy's face flushed with shock, her eyes filling with tears. Her mother looked away, embarrassed by the public humiliation. The staff in the room pretended not to hear, but the pain was too loud to ignore. Ola sat frozen for a moment, unable to speak. He had expected disrespect, but not this level of cruelty. Slowly he stood up, forcing a small, painful smile. "Thank you for having me, sir," he whispered, even though his voice trembled. Without causing a scene or raising his voice, he walked out of the mansion, each step heavy with disappointment. Outside, the night breeze met his face, but it couldn't cool the burning shame inside him. Tommy rushed after him, apologizing and begging him not to let her father's words break him. She held his hand tightly, torn between choosing her family or choosing love. Ola looked at her with sad eyes and said, "One day he will regret calling me a nobody." But deep inside, he wondered if love was enough to survive a world that treated him like he didn't belong. After the humiliating dinner, everything changed overnight. Chief Atateo didn't just express his disapproval. He turned it into a command. The next morning, he told Tommy she was forbidden from seeing Ola again. His voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. He threatened to cut her off, reminding her of the life he had provided and the name she carried. Tommy stood silently, her heart breaking, but she wasn't the kind of woman who let fear control her. She loved Ola too deeply to walk away just because her father demanded it. Even when Chief collected her phone and tried to monitor her movements, she found ways to escape and see Ola in secret. Their secret meetings became their only moments of peace. They would sit inside his small workshop or meet near a quiet corner of the street at night. Tommy always showed up with worry in her eyes, but hope in her voice. She held Ola's hands and begged him not to let her father's words crush his spirit. She assured him that she saw greatness in him, even if no one else did right now. Ola listened carefully, trying to absorb her strength. But inside he carried a silent hurt he couldn't express. He felt like he wasn't enough for her family, yet he didn't want to lose the woman who believed in him when he had nothing. One evening, as Tommy prepared to leave before anyone noticed her absence, Ola finally made her a promise. He held her face gently and said, "One day, your father will regret calling me a nobody." His voice wasn't angry, it carried quiet determination. Tommy nodded, believing every word. She knew Ola wasn't the type of man to fight or shout. His strength was patience, discipline, and a heart that refused to turn bitter. Even though the situation hurt him, Ola refused to disrespect her father. He didn't argue or try to force his way into their family. Instead, he decided to face the pain with dignity. He focused on working harder, learning more, and improving himself every day. He believed that success would speak louder than any confrontation ever could. While Tommy faced pressure at home and constant warnings, Ola used the rejection as fuel, pushing himself to rise above the label he had been given. And even in the struggle, he carried her love like a quiet fire that refused to die. Leaving Ibadan was one of the hardest decisions Ola ever made, but he knew he needed a fresh start far from the whispers and judgment. He moved to Lagos with only a small bag and the little money he had saved. The city welcomed him with noise, traffic, and endless hustle. He found a tiny room in a crowded compound, barely big enough for a mattress and a table, but he treated it like a stepping stone, not a final home. Every morning, he worked at a mechanic shop, sweating under the sun as he repaired cars for impatient Legos customers. He earned just enough to survive, but he refused to complain. At night, he switched to ride-hailing, driving around the city until he was almost too tired to keep his eyes open. Some nights he returned to his room with aching arms and dusty clothes, but he kept telling himself this grind was only temporary. Even in his exhaustion, Ola never stopped dreaming of something bigger. He spent his late nights learning on his old phone, watching tutorials about auto diagnostics and electric car repair, the future of the industry. He studied how to run a business, how to treat customers, how to grow something from nothing. Sometimes the power went out, and he sat outside with his phone flashlight on, determined to finish whatever lesson he started. He didn't have money for textbooks or fancy courses, but he used every free resource he could find online. Slowly, he began understanding things he never imagined he would one day master. Through all the struggle, Tommy remained his quiet source of strength. She risked everything to send him short messages of encouragement, hiding them from her father. "I'm proud of you," she would write. "Don't stop. You're building your future." Those words sometimes came late at night when Ola felt like giving up, and they gave him the push to keep going. He never replied too emotionally, afraid her father might check her phone, but the messages stayed in his heart like fuel. Each time he felt overwhelmed, he remembered why he left home in the first place. Not to prove himself to the world, but to build a life worthy of the woman who believed in him. Legos tested him every day, but it also shaped him. The long hours, the loneliness, the hunger, and the grind carved a new strength inside him. And even though he was still living in a tiny room, Ola felt himself growing into the man he always knew he could be. Ola's breakthrough came on a day that started like every other. Hot sun, tight deadlines, and a long line of frustrated customers. He was working at the Legos mechanic shop when a wealthy businesswoman arrived in a sleek black Range Rover. Her car had already been to 3 different high-end workshops, and none of them could solve the problem. She looked frustrated, almost ready to give up, but someone had told her about the young mechanic who works miracles with his hands. Ola listened calmly as she explained the issue, and while other mechanics had dismissed it as complicated, he approached it with quiet confidence. He spent hours scanning, studying, and testing until he found a hidden electrical fault deep inside the system. When the car's engine finally started smoothly, the woman stared at him in shock, impressed by his skill and patience. She asked for his name and Ola simply said, "Olealoa ma." She wasn't just grateful. She was amazed that a young man working in a small, crowded shop could fix what big workshops couldn't. She paid him generously and left with a promise. "I will tell people about you." And she kept her word. Within days, her friends, owners of luxury cars and CEOs of big companies, started coming to look for the genius mechanic. They didn't care that he worked under a tin roof or that he wore stained overalls. All they wanted was someone who could fix their cars with precision and honesty. Ola's reputation spread across the city faster than he ever imagined. People began calling him the boy who fixes the impossible. His boss noticed the sudden attention and tried to take credit, but the customers kept asking for Ola personally. With every job he completed, he saved a little more money, cutting back on his food, rest, and comfort just to keep moving toward his dream. After months of non-stop work, he finally gathered enough to rent a small shop space of his own. He painted the walls himself, bought second-hand tools, and hung a simple signboard that read, "Ola Tech Auto Diagnostics." It wasn't fancy, but it was his. The moment he unlocked the door for the first time, he felt something shift inside him. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was a business owner, building a future from the same hands that people once looked down on. And as customers started arriving at his new shop, he realized this was only the beginning of something far bigger than he ever dreamed. That Olatech Auto Diagnostics quickly became more than just a small workshop. At first, only a few customers came, mostly referrals from the wealthy businesswoman. But within months, the street outside his shop was filled with some of the most expensive cars in Lagos. Benz, Lexus, Range Rover, and even cars he once only admired from afar now lined up outside his door waiting for his hands. People didn't choose him because his shop was fancy. They came because they trusted him. Ola treated every customer with respect, explained every repair in simple language, and never overcharged anyone. His honesty became his strongest advertisement, and soon even celebrities and politicians started asking for appointments. As the work increased, Ola realized he couldn't do everything alone. Instead of hiring just anyone, he went back to Ibadan and Lagos streets to find hard-working young men who needed opportunities. He trained them himself, teaching them not just repair skills but discipline, customer service, and integrity. The workshop began to feel like a family. Everyone focused, everyone learning, everyone growing. Customers noticed the difference. They didn't just see a business. They saw a team working with passion and unity. Slowly, Olatech started standing out in an industry where trust was rare. Ola didn't stop at physical repairs. Late at night, when the shop lights were off and his workers had gone home, he sat with his laptop and worked on something bigger. He started developing a simple car scanning software to detect hidden faults in newer vehicles, something most local workshops didn't have. It took months of trial and error, many nights of little sleep, and countless online tutorials. But when the software finally worked, it shocked even him. It was accurate, fast, and perfect for the Nigerian auto market. One day, a representative from a major tech company visited his shop after hearing about his creation. They tested the software and were amazed. They invited him to a meeting, asking questions, taking notes, and discussing possibilities. Suddenly, Ola was no longer just a mechanic. He was a young innovator on the radar of big investors. Offers started coming, some for partnerships, others to expand his brand across cities. People who once ignored him now wanted to be part of his journey. The same man who had once been labeled a nobody was now being spoken about in boardrooms. His name appeared in blogs, business pages, and social media posts celebrating his rise. Ola didn't shout or brag. He simply continued working with the same quiet focus he started with. But deep inside, he knew his life had changed forever. Tommy reached a point where she could no longer live under her father's control. She had watched Ola grow from a struggling mechanic into a hardworking young businessman, and she knew he was the man she wanted to spend her life with, no matter the cost. One evening, after another heated argument at home, she made her decision. She packed a small bag, left a note for her mother, and walked out of the house with tears in her eyes but courage in her heart. She met Ola outside his workshop, and without hesitation she said, "I choose you." Those words were all Ola needed to hear. They decided to get married quietly, surrounded only by a few close friends and people who truly supported them. Their wedding was simple, a small hall, soft music, and no fancy decorations. There were no expensive outfits, no designer rings, and no long guest list. But there was genuine love in every moment. Tommy wore a modest dress, smiling more than she ever had, and Ola held her hands like they were the most precious thing he owned. Even though the ceremony was small, it felt perfect. They were finally building their own home, free from judgment and pressure. For once, Tommy felt peace knowing she had married someone who valued her heart over her family name. Meanwhile, Chief Adateo reacted exactly as expected. When he learned what she had done, he was furious. He told her she was no longer part of his household, and cut her off financially. He refused to attend the wedding, refused to send a message, and refused to grant even a blessing. It hurt Tommy deeply, but she didn't allow the pain to steal her joy. She believed that love built on honesty and respect would outlast any pride or rejection. Ola, on the other hand, was heartbroken that she had to sacrifice so much because of him. But instead of drowning in guilt, he made a quiet promise to himself to treat her like a queen, even if he couldn't give her luxury yet. Their first months together were far from easy. They lived modestly, sharing responsibilities, counting every naira, and adjusting to a life with limited comfort. But those struggles brought them closer. They cooked together in their small kitchen, laughed over cheap dinners, and held each other through sleepless nights. With every difficulty they faced, their bond deepened. Tommy saw the sincerity in Ola's efforts, and Ola saw the strength in Tommy's loyalty. Their love no longer needed approval. It had already survived the hardest test. Months after Tommy and Ola settled into their new life, trouble struck the Adateo household in a way no one expected. Chief Adateo's company, known for its spotless reputation, was suddenly hit with a serious fraud accusation. A business partner claimed that several company vehicles had been used to cover illegal activities, and the evidence pointed directly at Chief. Overnight, newspapers, blogs, and social media carried his name with headlines filled with scandal. Investors pulled back, board members panicked, and the company's shares dropped. What started as a misunderstanding quickly turned into a criminal investigation that threatened his entire life, his business, his wealth, and even his freedom. For a man who built his identity on status and power, it felt like the world was crushing down on him. The case grew more complicated when the court demanded an autoforensic analysis on the vehicles involved. This wasn't something any regular mechanic could handle. It required deep knowledge of diagnostics, tracking systems, and electronic car records. Chief's lawyers searched every corner of the state for an expert who could help prove his innocence, but every specialist they contacted either lacked the skills or refused to get involved in such a high-profile case. The situation became desperate. If they failed to find the right expert, Chief could lose everything and even face jail time. During a tense meeting with his legal team, a name kept coming up. The lawyers said, "There's only one person in the entire state who has the skill set we need." Chief leaned forward, anxious for hope. But when they mentioned the name, Olealua, his entire body froze. His daughter's husband. The same young man he humiliated and rejected. The same nobody he once dismissed at his dining table. The room went silent as the reality sank in. The only person who could save him was the man he had insulted and pushed out of his family. Chief felt ashamed, but he had no choice. His pride suddenly felt too small compared to what he stood to lose. His lawyers contacted Olatech Auto Diagnostics, explaining the case and the urgency. Ola listened quietly, surprised but calm. He understood the weight of the situation. Despite everything, he didn't celebrate Chief's downfall. He simply prepared himself for the task ahead. What mattered now wasn't revenge or bitterness. It was the truth. And Ola knew he was the one person capable of uncovering it. The day of the hearing arrived with heavy tension hanging in the air. The courtroom was filled with reporters, lawyers, and curious spectators waiting to witness the downfall of a once-respected businessman. Chief Adateo walked in wearing a stiff suit, but his usual confidence was gone. His eyes were tired, his shoulders heavy, and every step he took felt like the world was watching him crumble. As he moved toward his seat with his legal team guiding him, his eyes suddenly stopped on someone he never expected to see. There, sitting confidently beside the lawyers, was Olealua. Dressed neatly, calm and focused, Ola looked like a completely different man. Stronger, wiser, and far more accomplished than the young mechanic Chief had insulted years ago. In front of him were files, digital reports, and the equipment he needed for the autoforensic analysis. For a moment, the entire room seemed to fade as Chief stared in disbelief. His heart dropped. The same man he once dismissed as a nobody was now the expert standing between him and ruin. Tommy, who had come to support Ola, felt her breath catch when her father walked in. She wasn't sure how he would react, but she stood quietly, her eyes shining with pride. She had always known Ola would rise, but seeing him in this position, strong, composed, and respected, made her feel even more grateful for the man she married. She watched as he greeted the lawyers politely and prepared his documents with steady hands. Chief finally approached the table, his voice shaky. "Ola, you're the expert?" he asked, barely believing his own words. Ola looked up gently, not with anger, but with calm professionalism. "Yes, sir. I'm here to present my findings," he replied. There was no bitterness in his tone, no sign of revenge, only maturity. It was the kind of grace that only a man who had truly grown could carry. Chief's face tightened with shame. He remembered every harsh word, every insult, every moment he had made Ola feel small. Now the power had shifted, but Ola didn't use it to humiliate him. Instead, he kept his focus on the case, speaking clearly with the lawyers and preparing his evidence. His behavior shocked everyone in the courtroom. He wasn't there to settle old scores. He was there to do his job with integrity. For the first time, Chief understood the true meaning of character. Not wealth, not status, but strength wrapped in humility. As he sat down quietly, he realized he was in the hands of the very man he once believed would never amount to anything. When the session began, the courtroom fell silent as Ola stepped forward with his files and devices. He spoke calmly, explaining every detail of his investigation. Using his diagnostic software and technical knowledge, he showed the court how the vehicle records had been manipulated. He played the data logs, pointed out the timestamps, and revealed hidden tracking codes that most experts had overlooked. The entire room listened closely as he broke down the evidence in simple, clear language that even the judge nodded along to. Bit by bit, the true picture became clear. Chief Atateo had not committed fraud. Someone inside the company had used the vehicles to cover their own illegal activities and tried to shift the blame onto him. When Ola revealed the name of the real culprit, a senior manager who had access to the company's fleet, the courtroom erupted in murmurs. The man tried to deny it, but the evidence Ola presented left no space for argument. It was airtight, precise, and impossible to dispute. Even the prosecutor was forced to admit that Ola's findings changed the direction of the entire case. For the first time since the scandal began, Chief lifted his head, hope returning to his eyes. The judge leaned forward, visibly impressed. "Young man," he said, "your brilliance and clarity have been invaluable to this court. Without your expertise, this case could have taken a wrong turn." He then turned to Chief and announced that he was fully acquitted of all charges. Relief washed over Chief like a wave as the courtroom applauded Ola's work. It was a moment none of them would ever forget. The same man who had once been dismissed as worthless was now being praised in front of everyone for saving a powerful man's reputation. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around, but Chief ignored them. He walked straight to Ola, his steps unsteady. Then, in front of everyone, the once proud man fell to his knees. Tears filled his eyes as he looked up at the son-in-law he had rejected so harshly. His voice broke as he said, "My son, I was wrong about you. Forgive me." The crowd gasped, but Ola quickly reached down and helped him to his feet. He didn't humiliate him, or show any anger. Instead, he spoke softly, with a gentle smile. "A nobody became the man who saved your name." Those words hit Chief deeply. In that moment, he realized that respect had nothing to do with wealth. It came from character, humility, and strength. Few weeks after the court case ended, Chief Atateo decided it was time to make things right. Not privately, not quietly, but in front of everyone who once heard him reject Ola. He organized a large family gathering at his home, inviting relatives, business partners, and close friends. People arrived expecting a formal event, but none of them knew what Chief had planned. The mansion was filled with warm lights, music, and the familiar smell of Nigerian dishes, but there was a different kind of energy in the air. Something tender, something honest. When Ola and Tommy walked in, hand in hand, the room fell silent. Many guests recognized Ola as the brilliant expert who saved Chief in court, but even more remembered him as the young man Chief had once called a nobody. Tommy squeezed his hand, her eyes already glassy with emotion. Ola stood tall, calm, and respectful, ready for whatever was about to happen. Chief stepped forward and called everyone's attention. His voice trembled a little, not from fear but from humility. "Today," he said, "I want to correct the biggest mistake I have ever made." He walked toward Ola, placing a hand on his shoulder, and continued, "This young man, this great man is my son. Not by force, not by obligation but by honor." The room erupted in whispers as people exchanged surprised glances. Chief wasn't done. He lifted Ola's hand and said with pride, "He is the man who protected my name when I doubted his. He is the blessing I didn't know God had sent into my family." Tommy covered her mouth, trying not to cry. Her mother wiped her eyes discreetly. Even some of Chief's business associates nodded with admiration, touched by the sincerity of his words. Chief pulled Ola into a tight embrace, holding him like a father finally claiming the son he should have accepted long ago. Tommy joined them, and for a moment, it felt like the world paused. The family that had once been divided stood together, whole and healed. As they held each other, a soft voiceover played in the background as if narrating their journey. "The man who called me nothing now introduces me as his greatest blessing." The camera slowly pulled back, capturing the unity, the forgiveness, and the powerful transformation that had taken place. Then the final quote appeared, glowing softly on the screen. "They may doubt your worth today, but destiny will make them speak your name tomorrow."